Hi, my name's Chris Leuck, and this is the gospel in my own words. We have to start with the fact that God made us, and deep down, we all know that this is true. He made us to know Him and love Him, to worship Him and serve Him, but instead we have all rebelled against Him. We have sinned, and sin has separated us from God. It has caused a terrible separation that the Bible calls enmity or hostility. Our sin has made us enemies of God. We see the roots of this separation all the way back in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve. We know that God made Adam and Eve and placed them in the garden to live with Him. He gave them a world of yes with one no. Do not eat of that tree in the garden. Of course, they disobeyed, ushering in all of the sin and death and destruction that the world has ever known. But the thing that I want us to think about for a minute is that after they sinned, God sent Adam and Eve out of the garden, and He guarded the way back in with a flaming sword. That was the flaming sword of God's wrath and condemnation. So when Adam and Eve get outside the garden and realize what they've done and realize they desperately want to be back in right relationship with God, they turn and realize there is this great chasm. They are facing the wrath of God. They had a great need to be in right relationship with God, but they couldn't because they had sin. And to be right with God, we must be without sin because He is holy and knows no sin. And not only for Adam and Eve, but for all of us. We have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Sin separates us from God, and it earns us His wrath and condemnation. But the good news is that God loved us so much that He sent His Son Jesus in our place. Jesus did not have to leave the presence of God. He chose to. He chose to go outside the garden, so to speak, to live a life of perfect obedience in our place. And He did not have to die because only sinners have to die. He chose to. He chose to take the flaming sword of God's wrath and condemnation on Himself on the cross. Jesus then rose from the grave, and where that flaming sword was guarding the way back in, He now stands as the door back into fellowship with God. He says so Himself in John chapter 10, "I am the door, and anyone who enters by me will be saved, and there is no other way." Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." So come to Christ. All are welcome. We all have way more than just one sin, but God's grace and mercy and love in Jesus Christ are sufficient to cover us. Jesus died for our sins, and He rose from the grave to make us right with God.